I think at that point we were like, wouldn't it be amazing if a drag queen could have a #1 record? Wouldn't that be something? And Supermodel was really that opportunity, and that dream became a reality for Ru.
I'm Sara Jane Ho, and this is Mind Your Manners, where no topic is off limits as we uncover the secrets to feeling at ease in every situation. Our guest today has built a career spotlighting people who dared to live their truth, even when the world mocked them for it. Fenton Bailey is the Emmy-winning executive producer behind RuPaul's Drag Race, co-founder of the production company World of Wonder, and author of ScreenAge. But long before he was telling other people's stories, he was obsessed with watching them on television. In fact, TV taught him everything: how people perform identity, how culture shapes our sense of self, and how the characters we see on screen define what's acceptable and what isn't. So today, we're talking about the etiquette of visibility. What does it take to live out loud, and what does it cost? Fenton, welcome to the pod.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you for that intro.
You're welcome. So growing up in the UK with traditional expectations in the 1970s, tell us what that was like.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I haven't been asked that question before. And let me tell you, the 1970s in Britain was a very grey time. It wasn't really, I think the first performance of Rocky Horror was in 1972. So, and in a way that was sort of such a milestone. Obviously, I was 12 years old. I didn't see the show until the movie came out several years later. But Rocky Horror was not the vibe of Britain. It was kind of mired in trade union disputes and labor disputes, and it was a ping-ponging between a labor and a conservative government. There were rumors of a military coup. There was a 3-day week. There were power cuts.
Well,
and the whole thing was bizarre.
But you have to tell us, for those of us born after
Yes.
the 1970s, what is Rocky Horror?
Well, Rocky Horror, the Rocky Horror show is, oh my gosh, how to describe it? It's a musical, and it's a mashup of sort of kitschy sci-fi movies, and stars a central character is called Frankenfurter, who is an alien from outer space, who's come on a mission to build himself a man with blonde hair and a tan. And Frankenfurter is a cross-dresser, a sweet transvestite as he sings in the show. And it's a very decadent, balls to the wall, outrageous, politically incorrect romp, I suppose, about the adventures of Frankenfurter here on Earth. And he ropes into his evil lair, you could say, a very straight couple who've just got married, and they get lost on their way to the honeymoon and come upon Frankenfurter's castle, where him and his other extraterrestrials are living the most decadent, debauched life, and it goes on from there.
So,
so that's in a nutshell.
So this sounds like it was a character that, at a pop culture moment, that formed your lens?
Oh, I would say so, yes. I mean, when I saw the film, I had never really seen anything like it. And I think I snuck in. I wasn't old enough technically to see the film. The film was called The Rocky Horror Picture Show. And funnily enough, we have executive produced a documentary about Rocky Horror, because it is now 50 years since the movie. And that's going to be premiering at the Sheffield Documentary Festival next month in June.
Wow.
But yes, it was primarily, fundamentally formative. And the only thing really before that I saw was Batman, the TV show, the 60s TV show. It was very American, it was very loud, it was very camp, it was very brightly colored. I mean, I guess what both things have in common is that they're extremely camp
And did you know you were gay then?
No, no, no. I mean, I maybe knew by the time I was about 16, but I didn't really. Certainly, when I was watching the Batman show, I was 6, so I had no idea. But other than that, things draw you to them in your life, and you don't often know why. And that was certainly the case for me as a 6-year-old watching Batman and Robin. I don't know why, but I loved that show so much, and I got so excited when it was on, and my parents thought it was terrible trash and didn't want me to watch it. And, there was a great fear of, 1, color television, 2, American pop culture. These things were seen as terrible influences. And maybe they were right in retrospect.
Wow. And so English sensibilities were sort of, they found all this American stuff jarring.
Oh, yes. I mean, complete rubbish, yes.
And so then what did your parents think when you decided to move to New York City in 1982 to attend NYU?
Well, I think by that point, it was too late. They'd kind of given up. No, I mean, I went to boarding school, and then I went to Oxford, and there was always this sort of question, what was I going to do with my life? And I knew what I didn't want to do. But one of the things I did want to do was go to America. And a friend was applying for a fellowship. I was like, what are you doing? He said, oh, I'm applying for this fellowship. I'm not going to get it. You won't get it. Don't bother with it. And I was like, no, tell me more. And it provided 2 years of tuition, if you got it, and living expenses wherever you wanted to go in the States. So I applied, and was completely blown away and surprised and ever thankful that I got it. And so that was my ticket.
And that was the beginning of your adult life. It's funny, I grew up in Hong Kong, went to boarding school in Exeter, New Hampshire, went to Georgetown. And my dream, I always felt that as a young and single person, I wanted to live in New York City.
Right.
And it's always easy to move back home, right? For you, the UK, or for me, Hong Kong or Asia. But there's an appeal about America, and there's an appeal about New York City. And it does breed the best of the best in any industry.
Oh, you're so right about that. And it was a sort of a beacon to me, certainly in this grey country that was sort of economically teetering on the brink of ruin.
The UK, right? That was Margaret Thatcher.
Well,
before
this was
Margaret
pre-Thatcher. I mean, Thatcher changed everything for good and bad.
Good, yeah,
well, I say for good and bad because there are a lot of people who loathe her.
My father likes her.
It's a really complicated question because on the one hand, she did break the economic paralysis of the country, but she did so, to do so involved breaking the unions, which caused untold suffering in the north of the country. And the middle class in the south were much better off, and it didn't really affect them. I mean, the power cuts, they were kind of, if you're a kid, they were an adventure, to have candles and things like that. But it really wasn't an adventure for many working class people in the country. And so, on the one hand, she did perform an economic transformation of the country, but at great cost.
At great cost. And so the UK, it seems, was in sort of on the brink of financial ruin, but New York wasn't that much better. So tell us, what was the New York scene like when you arrived in 1982?
Well, it too, when I forget when it was that Gerald Ford told the city to drop dead, and
that's very rude.
Yes, well, it was a headline, so I don't know that he actually said to the city drop dead, but it was essentially a sort of a refusal to rescue the city from its economic nightmares. And so New York, 1979, early 80s, this again was, Reagan was just beginning, right? I think he was elected in 81 or 82, was it? Anyway, when Reagan was elected, it was a similar sort of transformation took place. But the New York I went to was, there were in the Lower East Side burned out buildings and squatters, and
was it dangerous?
It was a sort of depopulated war zone. It was very much, yes, it was. Soho where I ended up sharing a loft, was not a chic,
What it is
expensive
today.
neighborhood. No, no, no. It was like, it was still a garment district. And after about 5 o'clock, the place was abandoned. There were no restaurants. I think there was like one, like, really basic pizza place. You could never imagine what was going to happening, and lived in this loft, and it was an extraordinary amount of space to have. It was gorgeous. It was such fun, but there were rats, and
In your loft.
Oh,
And how
yes,
much
yes.
was rent?
One morning I came down and put a English muffin in the toaster, and out popped a rat. It was that
goodness.
sort of rent was, I think, three of us were sharing this loft. It was like 400 each a month.
Not that cheap. I mean, given it was the
That's
80,
true. Yeah, that's right. No, it wasn't. But it was like, 3,000 square feet. So
That's huge. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's so interesting because for people, I mean, for my generation, so I'm a millennial and younger, we're not really aware of the tough times of New York City. But it's funny because I have friends from New York whose parents, they lived through that time, and they still think that the subway is dangerous.
Yes.
From that day.
Well,
from those days.
there'd been what they call white flight, and people were living in the suburbs, and the people who lived in the suburbs thought rightly, I guess, at the time, that New York was dangerous, and it's taken a long time for that reputation to wear off. And when I met Randy, who was at film school with me, his parents, when he said he was going to move out of his home in New Jersey and move to the East Village, they were aghast. And Alphabet City was
rough.
It was rough. Yeah.
So it seems like you're really immersed in the downtown scene, right? You were living in Soho, you were downtown. And that's, I think, where you first experienced the drag scene,
Yes.
club culture.
Yes.
And I think the 80s was also an AIDS crisis.
Yeah.
How did drag change your understanding of identity and expression?
Having been at boarding school, an all-boys school, when we put on plays, they needed boys to play the female roles. So I wasn't unfamiliar with the idea of drag. In fact, I loved it. I played Judith Bliss in Noel Coward's Hay Fever. I was Clytemnestra's handmaiden in Agamemnon.
I'm sure you're very dainty.
And I was Queen of the Fairies in Midsummer Night's Dream. So, yeah, I loved it. And so, but drag as something outside a school play, I had experienced it because of Rocky Horror. I'd been sort of exposed to it, but I didn't know that there were drag queens doing shows. And that's where, Randy and I would go to the Pyramid Club for happy hour, which was like 7th and Avenue A. And it was this dive bar, but we saw these amazing shows. And I suppose really it was sort of recognizing that drag it's an art. It's a form of expression. Some people paint, some people write. It's an art, and they're artists. And what I particularly loved about drag was the way sort of East Village drag wasn't so much trying to mimic Hollywood glamour the way that some of the West Village drag was. It was more sort of kind of messy, kind of punk, sampling all sorts of things from popular culture. On the one hand, sending it all up and making fun of it, but on the other hand, kind of loving it and celebrating it. And I was thinking, I mean, I don't know that I knew this at the time, but it was like, this is the medium of our times. And I believe that now more than ever.
Wow. And that's where you met RuPaul, right? And I want to go into him later, but that's where you first met RuPaul in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. And so you mentioned Randy Barbato.
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 He's Italian.
He's Italian. And he's your creative partner, and he was formerly your personal partner. How did you and Randy meet, and what clicked between the two of you?
We met pretty much first day in film school.
At NYU.
At NYU. And it's so long ago. I'm like, what clicked? We just connected. We just hit it off. And he just seemed to me like kind of a cool guy. He was funny and smart and attractive. I mean, it was just like, oh wow. And I think Randy was somewhat appalled because I was very sort of new wave, not punk, but sort of. I had hair. I had very long hair, and it sort of pinned it up like Catherine. I wasn't drag necessarily, but it was sort of gender fluidy, I guess you could say.
And you were out already at that point, right?
No, not really.
Oh.
I mean, how could I not be? But in a way, it was odd in that my parents didn't know I was gay till I was like 35. Well, I didn't tell them I was gay until I was 35. And I was surprised, actually, that they had not reached that conclusion themselves. They professed to be surprised. But I know.
They're good actors.
I don't know if they were. I
Wow.
think maybe... Well, it's a British family,
Right.
So
right,
there's
course.
lots of things you don't talk about. You can maybe
Yeah,
relate
yep,
to that.
Yep, absolutely.
So,
being from a Hong Kong family, former British colony,
Right.
plus the Chinese, I get you.
Right.
So so it seems like you and Randy had both been observers of this incredible underground culture, but at some point you made a decision, which was let's start a production company. And where did that idea come from?
It sort of evolved. And our first misbegotten idea was let's start a band. And we formed a band called the PopTarts, which we later updated to be the Fabulous PopTarts. And we were sort of electronic. I have no musical ability, but this was a time of new wave and the British Invasion and Visage and Boy
The
George.
British Invasion?
And,
Oh, you mean Beatles?
no, that was the first British invasion.
Uh-oh.
I'm talking about the 80s invasion with MTV and sort of, the Eurythmics and the Pet Shop Boys and sort of electronic disco music, basically. Depeche Mode.
Psychedelic drugs?
Psychedelic Furs, the band, you mean?
Oh.
Do you mean the band or psychedelic drugs?
I mean,
I've
just
never
drugs,
done
like-
psychedelic drugs,
No,
no.
but it just, like, all these bands that you named
Oh, I
just
see.
kind of seem to
No,
be...
I don't. No, I think it was really drum machines and synthesizers. That was the sort of the vibe of it, and this sort of pop music coincided with the launch of MTV, and so suddenly it was sort of about image versus musical ability, and that worked very well for me because I have no musical ability, but I love pop. I love music videos. I love the imaging, the packaging, and I've always felt that pop at its best is that. It's not just being able to sing a tune. In fact, funny enough, to me, that's the least important part of it. And with synthesizers and drum machines, this is the first time if you had no musical training, if you couldn't play an instrument, you could, though, make music. Roxy Music, Brian Eno. I mean, a whole litany of people, most of whom were British, and, thanks to MTV. So it was it's called New Wave, and it was seen as the second British invasion. So we started this band. That didn't go so well, but we had a lot of adventures, but that's how we met Ru, and...
so that's how you met RuPaul?
Yeah, because we were performing.
For the drag races?
Long before Drag Race, yes. We were performing. We I think the very first time we saw Ru was... Randy and I have different versions. There was a music convention called the New Music Seminar, and Ru was there from Atlanta, and he had his album, and he was such a striking person.
Yes.
We also performed in Atlanta, and Ru introduced us on stage, and he was so good. It was like,
he's a star.
What are we doing? Well, yes, Ru's a star, but also we were like, well, we're probably not stars, and we were we were just like, we're not really,
So
Pop
how
Stars
did...
isn't in our future. So that's how the production company evolved, because we made music videos for ourselves, and at some point we were like, oh well, let's I guess the word now is pivot, but that wasn't a word then.
So let's pivot to being a production company.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, we liked working together. We got on well, and we felt that even though we weren't necessarily, we were contemporaries with like well, not Madonna. Madonna was already a big star, but she had broken out of the East Village. But then Delight, they broke out, and we knew them, and we were just sort of like, well, this isn't going to happen for us. And anyway, we're not. Maybe our hearts aren't in it that much. And plus, I think at that point we were like, wouldn't it be amazing if a drag queen could have a #1 record? Wouldn't that be something? And Supermodel was really that opportunity, and that dream became a reality for Ru. I mean, obviously, but Ru had asked us to manage him, and we thought, well, yeah, we know about the music business, we know about record deals and music publishing and how to make a music video, so let's do it. And we believed in Ru, you know. I mean,
yeah. I mean, it's interesting because when I look at all the works that you've done, it feels like your ethos is truth telling, boundary pushing, and also radical empathy. And,
radical empathy,
you know, and it's like you were giving the microphone to the mocked, you know. So I wanted to get into some of your projects. The first one being The Eyes of Tammy Faye, which was a documentary that came out in the year 2000. And for listeners out there, younger listeners who don't know about Tammy Faye yet.
Yes, of course, right.
So Tammy Faye and her husband Jim, they built an evangelical empire that encompassed a Christian ministry, a broadcasting network, and a theme park. And they were two of the most famous televangelists in America. And then they hit a sex and financial scandal, which led to their fall from grace. But the public was fascinated with them. So, and they were kind of, and you know, Tammy was, I mean, people kind of made fun of her, right, for her lashes and her big spending. What made you want to make a sympathetic documentary to her?
Well, I mean, that's a brilliant summary. They were a phenomena, and there just seemed to be not ambition, but boundless ambition in terms of them building this ministry, then launching a TV network, then launching a satellite. I mean, that was one of the most extraordinary things, that this sort of televangelism, that they could afford somehow to sort out a rocket and get a satellite into space and launch this, you know, global network was extraordinary. And then the theme park as well. I mean, alongside that, they really were pioneers and innovators. I mean, quite apart from the satellite and all that, and PTL, Praise the Lord Ministries, they had this studio in South Carolina, and they put on just 24 hours a day. They had shows. I mean, they were ruthlessly, brilliantly efficient. They had this base, and they just turned around the sets and turned around the shows. And Tammy Faye was just, aside from the messaging, the religious messaging, she was just a very entertaining, fantastic person. And I think that they really, you know, when you look at breakfast TV and the way that it's very much, you know, the hosts of breakfast TV are your families, and it's very intimate and casual. They created that model. They really had the first sort of morning show. Well, not the first morning show, but their model was adapted by the networks in the years to come. And when they went under, that satellite ended up going to CNN. And CNN used the satellite. So
to this day, is that still CNN satellite?
Well, I don't know if that particular satellite is still in the air, but you know. So, and it rested so much on the shoulders of Jim and Tammy. Jim was sort of the business mind, I guess, but Tammy was the entertainer. And I don't want to be shady about Jim, but he wasn't as charismatic or as funny or as just lovely as Tammy Faye. And Tammy Faye did have you could say, an extreme look for which she was mocked, but she also had a signature look. You know, she knew her look, and she also was in on the joke of herself and didn't take herself too seriously. And for those reasons, you know, she was quite a radical figure in televangelism, which is normally associated with, you know, hate-based so-called Christianity. You know, but Tammy was not like that. She accepted gays. She interviewed someone with AIDS, Stephen Peters, on
Yeah,
her show.
a gay Christian AIDS patient,
Yes.
right, in 1985.
Yes.
That was before Diana was hugging AIDS patients.
It was. She was a radical, and it caused a scandal, not just within the religious broadcasting community, but it was, on secular TV. They were like, wow, she was out front and fearless. So she was fun. She was like a drag queen in many respects, but she also had a heart as big as the Ritz.
And why did you choose to do a doc? Did you approach her, or I mean?
Well, so we were admirers of hers, fans of hers, and we used to watch her shows not because we were Christians and not because we would donate money, but just because she was so entertaining. But then when the scandal happened, it sort of seemed to us that it was potentially unfair and that the cards were very much stacked against them. And we didn't know this as we started looking into it. And it was a friend who suggested, he said, you should really do a documentary about her. And we're like, oh, okay, let's take a look. And we, the story we tell in The Eyes of Tammy Faye is of this sort of extraordinary conspiracy led by the Reverend Falwell to essentially hijack their ministry when they were beset by this scandal of gyms, and then basically put the competition out of business. I mean, that's what he intended to do, and that's what he did very effectively. Meanwhile, the secular press was piling on, and they were pariahs. And as we got to know Tammy, we're like, this is a story to tell, because it felt that whether you're a believer or not, that they, and Tammy in particular, had been done an injustice. And ultimately, Jim was sentenced to some ridiculous, something like 45 years in prison, when really all he had done was oversell timeshares, And I was like, that is hardly,
Yeah, there's something else going on.
I mean,
there.
when you look at the current president and the many felonies he has been convicted of, let alone the ones he's probably committing as we're speaking, it just seems ridiculous.
You know what, as a foreigner seeing this and hearing about this, it is so uniquely American to allow religious figures to become celebrities who, at least for a long time, they were untouchable by political systems.
Yeah.
Because in China, there would never be a Tammy Faye, because the belief would not be allowed to be a movement, right? So the religious part of it. And in fact, in China, religious movements that gather too much influence are shut down early because we see mass faith as a threat to national stability. And I do feel like a televangelism, it really is a uniquely American thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's so interesting because in a way, it very possibly is a threat to national stability. When you look at the Christian right and how Reagan, first Nixon, then Reagan, and more recently Trump, have all recognized that if they can get that voting bloc on their side, they are unstoppable. And then again, it is somewhat like a cult because the convictions of these people are not open to rational argument. And so you have, I think, a really dangerous, obviously unstable situation. So while I know the sort of mantra in America is freedom of speech, and that is always held up as what you don't have in China, I can see the point that what we have in America right now is very, very dangerous. And quite apart from, yes, probably should be against the law. And that's why the concept of separation of church and state has held so effectively all these years. But it turns out it's not really written into the Constitution. It's not really a law. And so here we are,
Yeah. So let's get into another of your documentaries, which is on Monica Lewinsky. It's called Monica in Black and White, and it came out in 2002. And I feel that this documentary was really about media shame, dignity, and rewriting a cultural story. So you were honoring complexity in the face of mockery. Tell us about how you came to do that and why you felt it was significant.
well, in all honesty, many of the things we do end up kind of accidentally. It would be great to sit here and say, yes, we sort of had this idea, and in fulfillment of that belief, we did this, that, and the other. But in the same way that a friend said, oh, you should do this film about Tammy Faye, it was Sheila Nevins at HBO who said, I'm meeting with Monica, and I think if she agrees to do this, that you should do this film. And what we did do right is we said yes, that would be great. And I think Monica was one of the early victims of a sort of, I guess, pre-internet shaming. It was a 24/7 news item, and similar in ways to the way that Tammy Faye was mocked and humiliated. Monica was similarly, really beaten up by the media. And I love the fact that now Monica has been able to
reclaim her narrative.
Turn that around.
Yes.
And I think it speaks to her resilience and her integrity and her strength. I admire her so much, like how she's been able to withstand what she has withstood and come through it. And now people say, oh yes, that we were out of order, we were bullies, we were, unforgivably unkind to her, and kind of ignoring the true narrative of what was going on. Again, kind of similar to Tammy Faye, what happened to Tammy Faye, that these two women were trampled underfoot, irrespective of the facts of the situation, which people just didn't want to hear and didn't care to hear.
Yeah, I remember I think I was in middle school or high school at the time, and any kid that was named Monica,
right?
I mean, they had a tough time.
Wow, yeah.
Just to have that name, it was really, really hard. And what about another of your documentaries on Britney Spears? Right? I Am Britney Jean. It was in 2013, and this really explored the public control versus private vulnerability. And I felt that it really narrated her pain with elegance. How did this come about?
I love that you mentioned that film, because it doesn't get talked about that much, I guess. And I feel that it does really reveal who Britney is in a way that so little of the coverage of Britney, as with Monica, as with Tammy Faye, so little of it does. We had heard that Britney was doing this residence in Vegas, which alone was quite a radical thing. No artist that young would do such a thing.
Why?
Vegas was seen as a place for the old, slightly has-been classics to go and sort of make some coin, but it wasn't where it was at.
So the Vegas residency was those places where you were sort of put out to pasture.
Kind of, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was sort of God's waiting room, really. But it wasn't where hot entertainers went. So it was sort of wild. And people were very negative about it. Vegas is bound to fail. She's a has-been. This is the worst career choice she could make. And we just sort of felt otherwise. And fortunately, CAA had just signed Britney. So we said to our agents, well, if you want us to stay with you, get us in the room with Britney.
So, wow, you were like, this, it's all or nothing.
It's get Britney, yes. And I mean, in truth, I think they were looking to do something with the road to Vegas, the behind the scenes thing. So it was, fortunately, we had the right intention at the right moment.
And also it was post-conservatorship rumblings, right? So people were...
let's see, she was still in the conservatorship.
Right, but people were talking about it and kind of raising
I don't think it had really come on the radar yet. Okay. And it wasn't really on the radar until maybe a year or so after the film was done. And it was really interesting because we spent a lot of time with Britney and with Jamie and spent time with them together.
Right, Jamie being the father, right? Jamie Spears.
And if there was something going on, we didn't see it. I mean, there are a couple of... she was protected, I guess. She, as as any A-list star, is going to have a team of people around them keeping the general public
gatekeepers. You
at
need
bay.
that.
You do, exactly. And I guess so it was slightly different, perhaps in Britney's case, to, say, Beyonce. But we also knew from, previous coverage of Britney that, there were issues. And in all our dealings with us, she was extraordinarily nice and down to earth and, almost not like a star and almost like sort of someone who was like, well, she says it in the interview. She said, I just love being on stage. And when I'm on stage, everything clicks and I become Britney Spears. But off stage, I'm Britney Jean. I'm just a normal, ordinary, shy person. And I think maybe the strain of that difference between who she just was as a normal... She says once when on one of the press junkets and the power failed, she was like, someone said, well, what have you been asked you haven't been asked before? And she's like, she's been asked everything many, many times. Yeah. And she said, the thing about me is I'm just a normal, boring person. And no one really wanted to hear that answer. But that is her truth, And I think now that we see her so-called freed, I fear for her.
Yeah. I actually, I have somebody who used to manage her. I'm friends with somebody who used to manage her. And they express the same concern. That they fear for her. Yeah,
I do. And her managers that we work with were very respectful. And sure, I believe history will show that between her family and her managers, even if mistakes were made, the intention was to protect her.
Yes.
From her, I was going to say illness, but, illness. Yeah, sure.
But what's interesting when you mention the Vegas residency is that Britney made it cool.
Exactly.
But right, because now you have then after her, J-Lo, Lady Gaga, Adele.
She started that whole thing.
Yeah,
she was the first one.
She turned it around.
Mm-hmm. That is why she has made one of the many contributions she has made to entertainment. And the mistake of the public is to believe that she is that sexy, she is not Britney Spears who sings the songs and who acts all hot and sexy. Yeah. She is Britney Spears, a normal, quiet, conservative, shy, by her own words, boring person. It's a construct. Of course, and that's what Tammy Faye is, a construct. She knew it was a construct.
Yeah, she knew to play into that.
Yes, and I think for Britney it's been harder. But also, Tammy Faye was never a teen idol who had millions of people screaming for her.
Right, at such a young age.
It was more manageable,
So what about arguably your most successful production to date, which is RuPaul's Drag Race? And for our listeners out there, a lot of you probably know about it. It's one of the most successful and influential reality competition shows of all time. It's not just a TV show, it's a global movement that transformed pop culture, boosted LGBTQ visibility, and has actually built an entertainment empire. It's been around since 2009, so this is its 15th, 16th season?
16, sweet 16.
And so basically in each season, you have a group of drag performers who are called queens go through weekly challenges that test their charisma, their uniqueness, their nerve, their talent. And these include runway fashion looks. They include lip sync battles, acting, dancing, makeovers. What does drag teach us about life?
I keep on thinking about what Ru says, because he says so many wise, inspiring things to me, I think, that I find inspiring. You're born naked and the rest is drag, is one.
Wow, you're born naked and the rest is drag.
Everything we wear, assuming that we're not naked, and that itself is a statement, everything we wear is, we're making a statement about ourselves. How we feel about ourselves, or how we want other people to respond to us, or maybe what our fantasy of ourselves is. So in a way, it's all drag. And that is why I've always felt that what may have once been seen as a marginal medium is in fact fundamentally a medium for everyone, fundamentally a mainstream medium, something for all of us. And then Ru also says, that one of his biggest life lessons was learning not to take life too seriously, which doesn't mean to blow everything off and be irresponsible, but the sense of proportion, or the sense that your drama may be intense and may seem overwhelming at times, but if you can step back and not take it too seriously, that's going to be a good life hack and a good lesson for everybody. Andy Warhol, who's sort of another sort of key figure, I guess, in my mind and inspiration, always said, well, you have a problem, so what? People don't like me, so what? It's a great sort of empowering thing of not to get consumed by the challenges and problems, because life is complicated. It is challenging, but being able to step back, being able to make fun of it, being able to not be consumed by the darkness is kind of super important. And then I guess the last thing is, drag is something anybody can do, and that it is creative, it is artistry. And it, I think, is quite, well, I was going to say radical. But again, it's part of this idea. It doesn't take anything too seriously. It looks at everything and then makes a joke of it, really. And that is a serious lesson. That is a serious thing to be able to do, to make fun of structures and power systems and, the queer community. One of the ways we've survived is being able to take oppression and make fun of it and mock it to its face. I think if you look at the oppressiveness of Trump, I think one of the most powerful things is people being able to make fun of him. And we know that it has impact. This is someone who desperately wants to be taken seriously, who has such a thin skin that the idea of cannot possibly stand being made fun of. And so I think drag is really a vital medium. And, look at Vegas. I think drag exists in so many ways. But we have a show in Vegas, Drag Race Live in Vegas. And Tom Campbell, who's the creative director at World of Wonder, who's so responsible for Drag Race in so many ways, he said to us once, the thing about Vegas is it's a city in drag. And you're right. You've got the Bellagio, you've got this Palazzo, you've got this Luxor pyramid. I mean, what about Vegas is not drag, And it's kind of a joke. It's entertainment and people love it.
Yeah. Fenton, when you were building Drag Race, you were creating space for identities that mainstream media either ignored or rejected. And what's interesting is how globally the same battles keep playing out. And when I was looking at RuPaul Drag Race and preparing for our interview, I immediately thought of Ting in China. I don't know if you've heard of her before. She's a transgender icon. So she was born a man, and in 1995 underwent a sex change in China. Mm-hmm. And she broke through as a host and a TV host and dancer. She's a household name in China. But today, she's actually facing increasing censorship and discrimination. So in the past few years, with the tightening of media control in China around LGBTQ and gender expression, she's actually been banned from public performances. Wow. And a lot of her previous content has been scrubbed.
Wow.
And it is sad to see somebody who's brought so much beauty and artistry to her culture, now being erased from it. And it reminds me that visibility is powerful, but it's also fragile depending on the political moment, like how you touched on. and I'm not trying to bring in American woke values
Right.
in any way or impose American woke ideals, but I'm just seeing it as an artist being censored for who they are.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that matters on a human level, not a political one.
Absolutely. But the human level is political, because how do we get politics unless it exists to facilitate society and the best life for the best possible number of people, rather than the best life for a few people? And I think that's what we're seeing in America now, which is a hostility towards immigrants, to outsiders, a fear of people of different religious faiths, and this desire that sort of the white male supremacy, which, is a misbegotten idea, because we're all people. And, it just seems like we've forgotten that, that fundamental American idea. Well, obviously, Trump has forgotten it. I mean, he's got the Declaration of Independence in his office, and he doesn't even know what it is. It's like, but it is that, we are all created equal, and we all have value. And it's funny you mentioned the word woke, because I don't think there's anything wrong with being awake. And even though it's become a bad word and used as an insult for the liberal left, or however you want to sort of characterize, I think that being awake and being conscious of other people and their needs and respectful of their differences is what it's all about. And I do think that in drag, that message is implicit in the medium. You accept people who don't look like you. You accept that if someone wants to wear something, they can do that. And not only do you accept it, as in a tolerate sense, no, you welcome it, you applaud it, you support it. Another word that has been sort of turned turned into an insult is snowflake.
Oh, I've never heard of that word.
Yes, but we on the left apparently are snowflakes because we're so fragile, apparently, and sensitive. But actually, a snowflake, every single snowflake is unique and different. And I think that perfectly, that's every human being is unique and different. And respect for that is the most important thing. Now, of course, you need a society, you need laws, you need rules. But you do not achieve them by oppressing others. And we've seen it before in history,
Yeah, everything in history repeats itself.
It does, yeah.
Although I think the problem with the terms woke is that everything's been too politicized, and it's been made such a big deal of that it doesn't represent what it initially was meant to represent anymore.
No, I agree, and I think that it's also problematic because the fundamental reasonableness of people is being lost in this cult-like mentality that's being very deliberately promoted.
Yeah.
And it won't end well. Yeah.
So moving on to parenting and adoption.
No, right.
Because when we first met and you were talking about your children, and I thought, oh, did you do surrogacy? Because, two gay men. And you said, no, we adopted.
Right.
And my immediate reaction was, I would happily adopt myself, except that my husband wouldn't really be on board.
Right.
And the reason for that is because, in fact, actually, Chinese people in general don't like to adopt,
Right.
because there's such a focus on blood ancestry, which we call 血脉 in Mandarin, and also on ancestor worship.
Right.
And so if, let's say, you're a son or you're a daughter, it's your sacred duty to continue the bloodline.
Right.
And with ancestor worship, if you have adopted children who are not part of the bloodline, it just kind of complicates things. But I personally think that people who are adopted are the kindest people in the world. And we've seen so many Westerners adopt Chinese babies, especially little girls. So can you tell us about your adoption story?
One of the things when I suppose I really recognized that I was gay and accepted that was also probably realizing that I wouldn't be able to get married and that I wouldn't be able to have a family. I always wanted to have kids. Maybe because I I grew up in a very loving family and loved that experience, I guess. And I started looking into adoption and quite quickly just recognized that if it would be possible, why not adopt someone? I don't have the same cultural traditions that you've talked about in terms of blood ancestry. Of course, every family, I do think, has some of that and wants to see it continued. But I just didn't have that sense of obligation. I have a brother and sister who are wonderful and they have kids. So I sort of felt, well, that's taken care of. And so, I was like recognizing that there are so many children, unwanted children in the world.
So many.
And the pro-life movement, on the one hand, you could agree with that, but then on the other hand, like, what happens to these kids when they are born? And so many kids are abused by their biological parents and abandoned by their biological parents, or just not wanted. And that just, I don't know, I just thought, well, I can do this. And I suppose the other thing is, in the queer community, I can't say this myself, but many of us have been, again, rejected by our biological families. And as a result, in the queer community, you have a very strong sense of chosen family, and the sort of the bloodline isn't as important as finding your tribe and forming a bond and relationship with people like yourself. And so it's really an extension of that, I think. And then the other thing, it's a complicated process, but I think even having a baby, biologically, it's a complicated process, so it's just different. But at one point in that journey, someone said the most amazing thing to me that always gets to me. My adoption counselor said, well, because I had worries, what if I adopt the wrong one? What if we don't connect? What if, I don't know, what if they're a psycho killer? What, grow up to be a psycho? How awful that would be. Those sorts of concerns. And anyway, she said to me, look, she didn't say I was thinking about this wrong, but she said, you don't choose your children. They choose you.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And actually, I've heard something similar for pets. I've heard it for cats, actually, where you don't choose a cat chooses you.
Exactly. And so
it's beautiful.
I can't explain that. I can't say that, but I know that Nolan and Elliot chose me and Billy, and I am so grateful to them.
Yeah. Where are they from?
Nolan's from Vietnam, and Elliot is from here in LA. So, and they're both wonderful and extraordinary. Nolan graduates school very soon and is off to NYU to go to NYU Tisch Film School.
Follow in his father's footsteps.
Yeah.
I was looking at some statistics around adopting, and they're pretty interesting. Same-sex couples are 7 times more likely to adopt. 1 out of 50 children in America are adopted. And my first experience around adoption was when I was 14 years old, and I went to Phillips Exeter Academy, a boarding school in New Hampshire in the US. And they had what they called a big sis, little sis program, where they asked for Asian students at the academy to be role models to Asian students that were adopted in the area, in New England area. And so I was a big sis, and then I had like a little sis, and you were assigned. And I remember Laura was my assigned little sister. She was originally from China. A lot of adopted kids. So China used to be very poor, and families couldn't afford to have children. And families always prized boys, sons over daughters.
Right.
So most of the babies given up for adoption were daughters. There was, I think, something like 29% of adopted children in America were from China, followed by Russia and then Guatemala. And that was my first experience. And they became my family. That her parents were so loving. I would spend Thanksgiving, etc., at their home, and it really opened my eyes a lot, and saw how kind and loving so many Americans were to take babies from other countries and really raise them as their own. It probably expands your heart in more ways than one, right?
Oh, absolutely. It was, it's the thing I'm proudest of, and it's weird to say proud, but it has been a lifesaver, in so many ways.
Yeah.
It's really the best. It really is. And I'm so happy. They're just amazing kids. And I guess I wish I'd done it sooner, but, yeah.
Who knows? Maybe in addition to having my own kids, I'll adopt a couple as well.
There you go. I really do recommend it, because they will show you things and teach you things, that you would never imagine,
And how do you see the world that they're inheriting versus the one that you grew up in?
Oh my gosh. Well, I do feel there's a lot to figure out. And for the, with what's happening politically in the country at the moment, I do believe it's not forever. And to me, they're citizens of the world. And in a way, that's who we all are, citizens of the world. And I think our challenge for them and for us is to get past the nationalism that be proud of your country, of course, but not proud of your country to the point of persecuting another country, or not, going to war with another country. Obviously, that we're all one people on one planet. And that, I think, funnily enough, what you're seeing with the tariffs right now is a lesson that, well, if America's going to sort of sabotage its own economy, the global economy is not going to collapse. It's just going to be more opportunities for other countries. And my word to what I would say to my kids is, be citizens of the world.
That's funny. That's something that my mother raised me to be. Her motto was live like a local. So no matter wherever we were holidaying, or whether I was studying somewhere else, she'd say, what would a local do? Live like a local.
Huh.
And my parents, they just always wanted to raise me to be a citizen of the world, where when I'm in China, my husband does not speak a word of English. Like, when I'm in China, I'm very China, to the consternation of my parents. And I think my mother's probably tickled in her grave, my late mother, at how Chinese I am in China. And but then obviously when I'm in America, I'm also very American. And wherever I go, I feel very at home, because that to me is that is sort of the purpose of life, to be able to move between people and countries and cultures, and be at home and feel one with them.
Like, how exciting and interesting.
I love
you
it.
have two different lives, and not that they're
they're very
at
different.
odds with each other, but
No.
it's funny, because one of my favorite words at the moment is glocal.
Oh,
GLO.
global, local.
Yes, like that.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, what makes a hit? And I'm like, well, when we go out and pitch, often the brief we're given by networks or streamers is, we want massive, returning, broad series, and that's great. Fine, sure, that's what everybody wants. But Squid Game was not that. Squid Game was a local show for that country that then became a global sensation. And that really, I think, as citizens of the world, when we're at our best, interested in what other communities, other cultures, other countries are doing. And so your idea of live like a local, yes, absolutely. Just go to these different places, speak different languages, explore different cultures, rather than be trying to turn everything into, I love McDonald's, but do you know what I mean? It isn't about a global franchise and an empire. We're past that point as a culture. We're past that point in the history of the world. We all have to work together, but none of us have to give up who we are to do so, I think.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So I want to end on a little game that I'm going to call Rude or Revolutionary.
Ooh.
And it's 4 different instances of when breaking the rules broke the internet.
Okay.
Each of us is going to have a paddle.
All right.
That says Rude or Revolutionary. There you go.
Great. Okay.
And I'm going to give you a scenario, and we both have to raise our paddle and decide whether it's rude or revolutionary. Okay. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's Oprah interview. Rude or revolutionary? It's a hard one.
Yeah. Oh!
We're both rude.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why? You first.
I love Oprah.
And you're English, so...
I love Oprah. And,
I love Oprah, yes.
And I actually don't mind the royal family. You know, I think, though, that what's happened is kind of unfortunate. And I feel badly for William and Meghan. I think they're in a...
You mean Harry and Meghan?
Harry and Meghan, sorry. Yes, oh my gosh. I feel bad for them. I feel they're in a tight spot and only seem to be able to dig themselves deeper. And I also think they're absolutely on the receiving end of a lot of hatred too, which is really regrettable. But
we still agree that interview was rude.
It's somehow, something's gone off the rails somehow. It's I don't exactly understand it all. And by the way, we made a series with the Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson, for the Oprah Winfrey Network, actually. So we spent a lot of time with her because she's a figure that's also been vilified, and I think would be the first to admit that she's also made mistakes. It wasn't revolutionary, it was rude, but I do think they are human beings, and that there has to be a path for them that, redemption's the wrong word, but, you know, a path, there has to be a path for them to be understood.
Yeah. You know, funny story about Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson. When I opened my etiquette schools in Beijing, in China in 2012, very quickly I got a phone call from her office saying, and I had a call with her, with Sarah Ferguson herself, because she was interested in coming to China and doing collaborations, workshops as well, to teach etiquette with me. Nothing came of it in the end, but it was interesting.
I'll tell you, I know you've got to get on, but I do want to tell you this. Like, she came to the office when we were making the series, and our office, I don't think you've been there, but on the top floor, you enter the door and there's a whole row of desks, and then our offices are at the end, and that's where the conference room is. So the meeting was in the conference room. It took her about an hour to get from the front door to the office because she went to everyone and talked to them. Wow. And she was so gracious and genuine, and that's what being a royal is. It's an extraordinary demand on a person to be so selfless and generous with your time, and you can't fake it. You have to be engaged. And I was so filled with admiration from that point on. As a fan, like, yeah, sure, mistakes and the challenges, but it's a difficult role to play.
It
and
is.
Many of those in the royal family play it with such grace and
Kate
sacrifice.
Middleton.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean,
All right, moving on.
Yes.
Okay, Nikki Glaser on Jimmy Fallon when she said, only skinny people are the ones who don't want you to take Ozempic. Do you remember that? Did you see that? You didn't see? Oh, it went viral.
I did not see that.
Okay, so
I
basically...
know she's very funny.
She's very funny, especially after her roasting Tom Brady. Should I say that? I mean, it's okay, right? Yeah, okay. And she kind of like, you know, became lit from that. But what she said on Jimmy Fallon was, she said, because he asked her, what do you think of Ozempic? She said, the shame is only from thin people who want you to stay fat. That's really where it's coming from. They're so mad that you're getting thin now because that's all they have, right? You're dynamic, you have a good personality, and they're so mad. Is it rude or revolutionary, what she said? Oh.
I'll tell you why I think it's rude. Because I think it's fundamentally pitting thin people against fat people. And there's nothing wrong with being fat. but there's nothing wrong with being thin. And maybe she didn't know this at the time, but there are off-label benefits to Ozempic and Mounjaro and that entire range of drugs. Heart disease, dementia, inflammation.
Yeah.
You know, my doctor said it's a miracle drug. And she was probably saying that in the moment when there was a shortage, but and there was that moment, but there is not a shortage now. And, you know...
Well, no, so Nikki Glaser is for people taking Ozempic.
Oh, good. Oh, okay. Well, then...
But no, she's pro people taking Ozempic.
Right.
And she says it's only the people who don't want you to take it are the skinny people who don't want you to be skinny like them.
Well, you see, but that's the bit that I think is rude. I think I'm revolutionary in terms of pro people taking Ozempic. I mean,
but rude in terms of putting it on skinny people.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
got it.
Exactly.
Next.
Right.
Okay. Chapel Roan asking fans for space after her sudden fame. Rude or revolutionary? Rude.
I love Chapel Roan. I totally love her.
I love her too.
But celebrity is a bit like royalty. It is an imposition on the self, but it is one that presumably you have asked for. And I'm sorry to say that being famous is not all ice cream and,
Cake,
privilege.
Exactly.
You have to deal with it. And I guess that could be me not being famous, being happy that I'm not. But it just comes with the territory. And
Stop
absolutely,
complaining.
It's hard. It really is hard. But I guess in some ways it is a bit like royalty. You have to kind of, I guess this is the British, there's a part of life, you just suck it up and get on with it, right?
Fenton, thank you so much for coming on the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really amazing, delightful. Thank you.
It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Listeners, thank you for tuning in to Mind Your Manners. This is your host and etiquette life guide, Sara Jane Ho. And remember, no matter what life throws at you, with me in your ear, you got this. Visit my YouTube channel to watch the full episode. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. I'll see you next Tuesday.